Hello, everybody. So, I'm inspired to share with you what's been going through my mind recently. I've had the joy of joining with two close brothers of mine, friends, mighty companions, and they were seemingly going through a challenging time, and it feels to them that the world is falling apart, their life is falling apart, and I think we can all to some extent relate to that in the sense that when things are not going our way, or we get tragedy or news that isn't what we've planned for, or we're surprised by, it does feel like everything's crumbling and everything's falling apart. In one case, a friend of mine who is a medical student failed a medical exam, a very important final exam, one of which would allow him to practice in a medical facility for which he had been offered a job opportunity contingent upon passing this exam. He also relocated to the state where this medical facility is and was referred to this job by a friend. And having not passed the exam, he's come to a point or a place where he feels very embarrassed, very ashamed, a lot of uncertainty about his future, about his move. And someone else close to me has just had the experience of their relationship falling apart and learning things about their significant other that they didn't know about. So, seeming sense of betrayal and lies. And so, although the specifics of these situations may seem foreign to us, maybe we haven't been in a situation similar to that. We've all been in a situation where things fall apart. Our life seems to crumble. It could be a death, could be a bankruptcy, could be a job loss. It could be a number of different forms or different shapes and circumstances and sizes. Some seem bigger and some seem smaller, but it doesn't really matter what it is. To the person who thinks that they're going through this, it's typically very overwhelming. And A Course in Miracles says that all difficulties stem from the fact that you do not know yourself. You don't know yourself, you don't know your brother, and you don't know God. And when we look at these situations, or as we contemplate these experiences where our life seems to be falling apart, or our life is falling apart, what we'll find, if we're really honest with ourselves, what we'll find is what's falling apart, or what seems to be falling apart, are the mental ideas, the images, the self-concepts and ideals that we've held in mind have fallen apart. So we have unconscious expectations of what the future is going to bring, or what's happening in our life. We have a trajectory, we have an idea, a self-concept, a character of ourselves that we take to be ourselves, and we invest heavily in the authorship of that character, and that character fulfilling these ideals and these situations. And in my experience, or in my story, I know that I've planned careers, I've been in relationships where that too has been my experience, where I've planned promotions, I've planned advancements, and I've had the experience where those things collapse. And so what has collapsed is not my life. I'm always okay. But my ideas, or the ideas about my life and how I see myself. And so when A Course in Miracles says that all of our difficulties stem from the fact that we don't know ourselves, it's because we've taken ourselves to be the mental images that we hold in our mind. And that's what the mind does. It holds a mental image of ourself. And this self is typically a body. It's typically a separate self that's making its way through an external world. And there's an outside world. And as we make our way through life and through this outside world, as we live that story, that what we find is that story will inevitably at some point fall apart. If not many times, it seems to fall apart. But if we're honest with ourselves, what we'll find is there's an aspect, there's a definitionless awareness that isn't changeable and is unalterable. And the mind, in its insistency to author and make and struggle and create its life, what we truly are, which is definitionless awareness, is obscured. And so when our life crumbles, or we're in an experience where everything's coming apart, falling apart, it is actually a beautiful thing. Seen from the perspective of spirit, seen with spiritual eyes, it's actually a very beautiful thing, because what's happening is we're being shown and told that that is not us. The mental images and the trajectory of for which we thought our life should take, or what it should be, that whole concept of creating ourselves the way we want to be, falls apart. And it falls apart so that we can be shown what's true. And so when things fall apart, we can actually take inventory of what's still standing, what still remains. And we'll never be able to answer that question in terms of form. We won't be able to say, that there's a particular form that remains, but rather there's awareness that remains. There's an inner awareness, a presence, that despite the crumbling ideas and the crumbling mental images, there's something within. There's a definitionless awareness that seems to reside behind the eyes, but in truth, it's not limited to behind the eyes or any location. And in these situations where life seems to fall apart, the mind wants to fix the problem by putting the pieces or the parts back together. And that often calls for a lot of struggle and a lot of pain and a lot of hard work, quite honestly. And sometimes it seems like we do fix our problems and that we do get back on our feet and we continue. But eventually we hit a wall again and again and again. But each one of these experiences are actually giving us an opportunity to stop everything, and take inventory of what is there, what's real, what has been unchanged throughout the story, throughout the mental idea of who we are. What's still there, what remains. And that can only be answered in experience. We can't really say what remains, but there's an awareness of something that does. And whatever that is what we are. Course in Miracles reminds us that there's an ancient peace that lies within us that has not been lost. And in our quest to author our experience or author our lives, what we're really trying to get to is that ancient peace, that joy, that happiness. It is the content for which we seek. And it's there and it hasn't gone. And that is what we are. Everything else has been put on, has been added on. The experience of a separate body, the naming of the body, that has been placed on. We believed that into experience, or we believed it into perceptual reality. But all of that changes. We will eventually die. Bodies die. But if we take the Course's language, we are children of God, sons of God, which is another way of saying we are extensions of Source. That means we share in the same attributes of Source, in its eternal nature, in its omnipotence, in its creativity, in its boundless freedom. It is so simple, and it is truly what we are. And it doesn't change because life circumstances seem to change. And so in this spiritual journey, if you will, what we're searching for is to come back to that answer, the one answer, which is we've actually never separated from our Source. We've never separated from God, and that we're always okay. And if we can allow ourselves to go with the flow allow ourselves to be led and not try to fight, not try to resist what's happening, we will find, or we would recognize that unchanging aspect of ourselves. It is ourselves. It isn't even an aspect of ourselves. It is completely full and whole, but it seems to be fogged by the idea of ourselves as people. All difficulties stem from the fact that you do not know yourself. The Course also says you do not know yourself, and you do not know your brother, and you do not know God. You do not know your brother if your circumstance is seemingly caused by someone out there. Someone caused you harm. Someone's at fault. We don't know our brother. Seeing our brother as a cause of our pain, as something separate from us, we've misperceived our brother. If we actually believe that we are capable of being harmed and that we are vulnerable, then we've lost touch with what God really is. All difficulties stem from the fact that you do not know yourself, your brother, or God. And so we're trying to, we're coming back. We want to know the truth of our brother. We want to know the truth of all things. We want to know the truth of God. We want to come into our true identity. We want to get back on track instead of detouring. And so as these circumstances come up, they provide a beautiful lesson for us if we're willing to see the lesson. But we must be willing to let go and go with the flow. We must be willing, and we must dare to stay in present awareness. Just stay right here. And I think if we're honest and we look back at our experiences or at our stories, we will find that there have been many times where our world has seemingly collapsed. And what's true through that whole thing is that we're okay. We've always been okay. We will always be okay, no matter what the form, however the form changes, we'll always be okay. We'll be better than okay. We'll be completely, I mean, it's not even we will be. We are. We will come to see perfect peace. Because from this perspective, when form changes, we recognize that the purpose of it is simply to forgive. The purpose of it, if it's coming up, is just simply to remind us that we've detoured. And so we come back to this state of mind, of presence and awareness. We don't take the bait of the chattering mind that wants to detour us into a fantasy world of imaginings and images and thoughts about the futures and fears. Course talks about the world being an illusion. It's really all the mental images. That's the illusion that we've taken to be real. It's the dream we've taken to be real. It is also inclusive of the external world we perceive. But if we can just start off with our mental images, everything's a mental image, everything's a thought. But if we can sometimes just start from this place of what's going through our mind and be present, regardless of what we're perceiving in the world, we will recognize that we're okay. And it's the one promise we can always make for ourselves, that we'll always be okay, no matter what. We are always okay. We are okay. We are okay. And as we allow ourselves to sink into that experience of okayness right now, we can see things for what they truly are. We can see it playing out. And so in our past experiences, sometimes we look back in our story, and at the time, because of the emotions that are involved, it's very scary, and we're very afraid, and we think our world's ended. I mean, I remember stories of when I was a kid, my world ended because I didn't get Space Invaders for Christmas. In my world, in my mental dream, it was like, I wanted Space Invaders. But of course, I can look back and laugh. I've outgrown the toy. And I recognized that my perception of reality, of what was happening, was skewed. It wasn't, where my investment was really wasn't where my happiness was. And so our investments in our mental concepts, or our mental idea of who we are and how our world should be, when everything collapses, we realize that investment has gone sour. It's gone wrong. But it allows us to question our investment. Do we want to keep investing in this self-concept? Do we want to keep investing in a separate self-concept idea of ourselves? What has it ever gotten us? Has it really gotten us peace? Has it? Certainly, maybe moments of happiness, moments of pleasure, but it's constantly changing. There's no, because it's all built on nothing, on imaginings, because it's all built on, the Course, I believe, references being built on sand, which sand could be washed away, right? It's going to wash away. But we're here to build our home on rock, on solid ground. And only in this presence is there solid ground. I mean, it's not even solid, but it is. It's unaltering. It is. It can be perceived as scary because we tend to lean on the thoughts of, or the happy thoughts of the future. We tend to lean on self concepts and ideas based on what we think it's going to give us. And then when they're gone, we have nothing to lean on. But there's actually safety in not leaning on anything. But this moment, I'm okay. I'm okay. Course in Miracles says that heaven is a state of mind for which recognizes the world's purpose as forgiveness. That's it. The physical world, everything, all the happenings, has no other purpose other than to overlook it. Overlook it. And seek only the kingdom of God. Seek only of what's real, which is this awareness. And regardless of how dim that seems, or how hard it may be for the mind to grasp, there is an aspect within that gets this. There's an aspect within that knows this experientially, doesn't know this secondhand, doesn't know this through intellectual knowledge, knows this experientially, because we have not left the sonship. We have not left the kingdom of God. Peace is all-encompassing, and it is right here. So let what's going to fall apart fall apart. And if it falls apart, we can look at it and see that all that's fallen apart is ideas we've attached to, thoughts we have attached to, investments we've misappropriated. What's true is, and there's relief. There's so much relief in that. Life is easy from that point of view. It's like, I don't have to do anything. Everything that is going to happen and be done will be done so spontaneously. It'll happen as it happens. My goodness, how much fun is that? Less is more. From the perspective of true identity, of what we truly are, our identity abides by the laws of spirit, which have nothing to do with the physical laws. Within the laws of spirit, time is non-existent. Therefore, all the rules of time can be changed. Anything can happen. Potential, anything and everything is potential. Nothing's left out. No possibilities left out. And so we see with fresh eyes. Everything's with fresh eyes. Everything's brand new. There's nothing to look back at. There's no value to look back at anything. Not to make future plans based on past reference points. There's nothing to judge. There's freedom. Freedom without judgment. Everything's welcome. It's all inclusive. Let's go with the flow. I love you.